Have you ever stood in a room full of your own family and felt completely alone? Imagine standing at your brother's funeral, the only person in your entire family who ever believed in you, the only one who called on your birthday, the only one who never made you feel like a failure. And before his body is even cold, your mother leans in and whispers a threat that shatters your world. Your heart is shattered. Your legs can barely hold you up. You're trying to stay strong for your little girl who's holding your hand and doesn't fully understand why mommy can't stop crying. And then you look around. Your mother won't look at you. Your sister is whispering to your aunt, and they both glance your way with venom in their eyes. Your father stands near the casket, and when you try to approach him, he turns his back. At your brother's funeral. You haven't even buried him yet, and already they're treating you like you're the one who died. But here's the thing they didn't know. Here's what none of them understood. This wasn't about money. This was never about money. This was about something so much deeper, something Marcus understood because he was there. He saw me show up for him when he got sick. He saw me driving 3 hours every weekend to sit by his bedside when no one else bothered. He knew who actually loved him and who only loved what he owned. And by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why he made the choice he did. You'll understand why I kept the lodge. And you'll understand why even though my family calls me a traitor, I would make the same decision all over again. But to understand that, I need to take you back to the very beginning, back when I was just a little girl, desperate for approval from a family that never seemed to have any love left for me. I grew up in a house where love felt like something you had to earn with straight A's and perfect behavior. My parents didn't hug, they evaluated, they measured, they compared. And the person they compared all of us to was always the same, my big brother, Marcus. Marcus was the golden child from the moment he could walk. Star athlete, honor roll, polite, charming. Teachers raved about him. Neighbors adored him. Church ladies pinched his cheeks and told my mother how blessed she was to have a son like that. And then there was me. I wasn't bad. I wasn't wild. I was just different. I liked stories more than science, daydreams more than debate teams. To my parents, that wasn't personality. It was failure. At the dinner table, my report card was read out loud like a public trial. Math, B-, my father would say, brows knitting together. Why can't you be more like Marcus? He never brought home anything less than an A. It didn't matter that I tried. It didn't matter that I stayed up late, that Marcus would sometimes sit with me and walk me through problems while my mom snapped that he was wasting his time. No one ever asked how hard I was working. They only saw that I wasn't him. By the time I was a teenager, that label had already sunk into my skin. The difficult one, the emotional one, the girl who cried too easily and laughed too loudly and never quite fit their mold. So when I got pregnant at 18, to them, it was like I had finally proven them right. I still remember the night I told them. I sat on the edge of the couch, hands shaking, pregnancy test in my pocket, and my mother sat across from me with her arms folded so tight I could see her knuckles turning white. "I made a mistake," I said, voice barely a whisper. "But I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to keep the baby." My father didn't yell, he just stood up, quietly, like something inside him shut off. "You had a future," he said. "We were going to help you with college. We were going to do our part. But if this is the path you choose, you're on your own. We won't support this." Support this. He said it like I was talking about a drug habit, not a child. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 days. When she finally did, it was only to tell me to pack my things. "If you're old enough to have a baby," she said, "you're old enough to figure out where to live." The only person who didn't look at me like I was a disgrace was Marcus. He came over the next morning with coffee and a bag of groceries like it was the most normal thing in the world. He didn't lecture me. He didn't ask me if I was sure. He just sat on the floor across from me while I cried into my hands. "You're going to be a good mom," he said softly. "You always take care of everybody. Now you're just going to have somebody who needs you the most." "Mom and Dad think I ruined my life," I choked out. "Mom and Dad are wrong a lot more than they think," he said, with that crooked smile that always made me feel like the world wasn't completely falling apart. "You made a hard choice, not a stupid one." When my parents cut off their financial help, the college dreams vanished overnight. I got a job at a diner while I was still pregnant, taking whatever shifts they'd give me. I worked until my ankles swelled, until my boss told me I had to sit down before I passed out. After my daughter Lily was born, it got even harder. Diapers, formula, rent, all on a server's wages and a few extra shifts at a grocery store. I learned how to stretch $10 into a week's worth of meals. I learned how to go without so my baby didn't have to. And through all of that, my parents never came to see her. Not once. No calls on her first birthday, no visits when she was sick. The only time my mother said Lily's name, it was followed by, "You dragged that child into this mess." But Marcus, he showed up. He'd drive over with little bags of groceries or slip a folded 20 into Lily's diaper bag by accident. He never made a big deal about it. He never made me feel like a charity case. Once, when Lily was about 2, I broke down in front of him. I had just gotten off a double shift, my feet were blistered, and Lily had a fever. I sat on the floor with my head in my hands and muttered, "Maybe Mom was right. Maybe I wasn't meant to be a mom. Maybe I'm just dragging her through a life of struggle." He knelt down, gently pried my hands away from my face, and said, "Do you know how many people would have walked away? You didn't. You stay. Every day. That's what a real parent does." That was Marcus. When his career took off, first a good corporate job, then his own business, and finally that mountain lodge he bought as an investment property, my parents swelled with pride. They bragged about him to everyone who would listen. "My son owns a lodge in the mountains," my mother would gush. "It's worth a fortune." Funny thing was, they never mentioned how often he invited me and Lily up there, how that lodge became the only place on earth where I felt truly safe. The first time we drove up, Lily was 4. I remember winding roads, pine trees pressing in on both sides, my old car making worrying little sounds as we climbed higher. I was terrified the whole way, of breaking down, of not belonging in a place that nice, of being turned away by some fancy property manager who'd look at my thrift store clothes and tell me there'd been a mistake. But when we pulled into the gravel driveway and that big wooden lodge came into view, Marcus was already on the porch, waving like an overexcited kid. He scooped Lily into his arms and spun her around, then turned to me and said, "This place is yours too, you know? I bought it so we'd all have somewhere to breathe." Inside, it was like something out of a movie. Tall ceilings, a big stone fireplace, windows that stared straight out at the mountains, like they were close enough to touch. He showed Lily the little bunk bedroom he'd set up just for her. Pink sheets, a teddy bear on the pillow. "You did all this for us?" I asked, trying not to cry. "For family," he said. "Real family." That was the first time I realized the lodge wasn't just an investment to him, it was a refuge, and he wanted me and my daughter to be part of that. Years passed, I kept grinding, 2 jobs, late nights, rushing from shift to daycare and back. My parents stayed distant, occasionally sending snide messages through my sister. Things like, "Maybe if you'd made better choices, you'd have a life like Marcus." They didn't know that on the weekends I could manage. I was driving 3 hours up to that lodge with Lily so we could have 24 hours of peace. So Marcus could make pancakes while Lily giggled and powder sugar clogantiques. So I could sit on the back porch with a mug of coffee and remember what it felt like not to be judged for every breath I took. Then Marcus got sick. It started small. A cough that wouldn't go away, some fatigue he blamed on stress. He brushed it off like men always seem to do. But then came the tests, the scans, the words that punch the air out of your lungs. Stage 3. My parents went into performance mode. They posted dramatic Bible verses online, told everyone at church to pray for their poor, brave son. They brought casseroles to the hospital once or twice, made sure everyone saw them in the waiting room, then went home early because it was too hard to see him like that. I couldn't afford to be dramatic. I just showed up. I'd work my shifts, drop Lily with a trusted neighbor, then drive those 3 hours to the hospital, sit by his bed, hold his hand when the drugs made him nauseous, change the channels when he was too weak to reach the remote. "Go home, you're exhausted," he'd say, eyes half closed. "I can sleep in the car," I'd joke. "Besides, who else is going to make fun of your ugly hospital gown?" Sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we'd just sit in silence while the machines beeped around us. But even in that sterile world with its beige walls and chemical smell, it felt like how the lodge used to feel. Like we were in our own little world, separate from the judgment and coldness waiting outside. One evening, while Lily was coloring in the living room and the sun was setting behind the peaks, I found Marcus on the porch, staring out at the horizon with this look on his face, part peace, part something else. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked suddenly. "Regret what?" I said. "Keeping Lily, choosing the hard road." I thought about it, about the nights I cried from exhaustion, the stacks of overdue bills, the times I'd had to say no to school field trips because I just didn't have the money. And then I pictured her little arms around my neck, the way she'd stroke my hair when she thought I was sleeping, whispering, "I love you, Mommy," like a secret. "No," I said quietly. "I regret a lot of things, but not her. Never her." He nodded, like that confirmed something he already knew. "You've always done the hard thing, even when nobody thanked you for it." "Yeah, and look where it got me, living paycheck to paycheck with parents who pretend I don't exist." He turned to me then, really looked at me. "One day," he said slowly, "you're going to have something they can't take credit for, something that's yours, and they're not going to like it." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He just smiled that same crooked smile and shook his head. "You'll see." At the time, I thought it was just one of those weird philosophical things people say when they're staring down their own mortality. I had no idea he was already making plans, signing papers, changing his will. I had no idea that mountain lodge I loved so much, that place where I finally felt like I belonged, would become the very thing my family used to cut me out for good. So when the call came after he died and the lawyer asked me to come into his office, I thought maybe he was leaving me a watch or a photo or some small sentimental thing. I had no idea I was about to be told that Marcus had left me everything. The day I walked into that attorney's office, I had no idea I was about to become a millionaire and lose my family in the same hour. It was 3 days after Marcus died. I was still moving through the world like I was underwater, everything muffled, everything slow. The lawyer had left a voicemail saying he needed to discuss Marcus's estate, and my first thought was that there had been some kind of mistake with the hospital bills. I figured maybe he'd left me some sentimental thing like his watch or an old photo. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw my parents' car. My sister's too. My stomach dropped. Of course they were here. Marcus was their shining achievement. Of course they wanted to hear what he'd left behind. I told myself it was fine, that I had nothing to be nervous about. I was just the broke single mom who'd show up, sit quietly, and slip out with maybe a framed picture if I was lucky. The receptionist led me to a conference room. My family was already seated around a long wooden table. My mother's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. My father didn't even look at me. My sister gave me one of those tight, polite smiles you give a stranger you don't like. "Thank you all for coming. the lawyer said as he walked in, shuffling some papers. "I know this is a difficult time." Difficult didn't begin to cover it. He went through the formalities first. Marcus's full name, date of death, legal language that made my skin crawl. I kept staring at the table, tracing a little scratch in the wood with my fingernail, trying not to cry. Then he cleared his throat. "As per Marcus's last will and testament," he began, "there are a few specific bequests and then the disposition of the primary asset." He read off a couple of small things: a donation to a charity Marcus liked, some stock shares to an old friend. My parents leaned forward, anticipating their moment. "And finally," the lawyer said, "regarding the property located at," he read out the mountain address and all associated structures, furnishings, and business accounts related to the lodge, valued at approximately $1,380,000. My mother actually smiled then. Just for a second, she reached over and squeezed my father's arm like, "See, this is it." Until Marcus bequeaths the entirety of this property and all associated rights solely to his sister, your name. Silence. For a few seconds, nobody breathed. I thought I'd misheard him. I actually looked around to see if there was another sister he could be talking about. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What, I'm sorry?" my mother said, finally, her voice ice cold. The lawyer repeated it, word for word. His eyes flicked over to me, kind but cautious, like he knew a bomb had just gone off. My father's face went red, not pink, red. He snapped, "There must be a mistake. The lodge is part of our family's legacy. Marcus always said." The lawyer shook his head gently. "Mr. Last Name, I went over this with your son several times. This is his final signed and witnessed will. He was very clear about his intentions." My sister swiveled to stare at me like I'd just pulled a mask and revealed a monster underneath. "What did you do?" she hissed. "What did you say to him?" I didn't do anything," I stammered. "I didn't even know." "Oh, cut the act," my mother snapped. And there it was, the real her. No church face, no polite mask. "You ran off, got yourself knocked up, and we didn't say a word." "That's not true," I whispered, but she talked over me. "You wasted every chance we gave you. While Marcus was building something, you were begging for handouts and dragging that poor child around from one cheap apartment to another." My hands were shaking so badly under the table that I had to sit on them. I wanted to stand up, to shout that I never begged them for anything, that it was always Marcus who helped me, but the words stuck in my throat. My father finally spoke, voice low and controlled, in that way that always used to scare me more than yelling. "You are not equipped to manage a property like that. You can't even manage your own life. This is absurd." The lawyer cleared his throat again. "Regardless of your opinions, the legal owner, upon signing acceptance, will be your daughter. It will be her decision how to proceed." Acceptance. The word rang in my ears. I hadn't processed that part yet. I had to sign something to make it real. Until I did, it was like the lodge existed in this weird limbo. Not theirs, not fully mine. My mother seemed to realize it at the exact same moment. She leaned forward, folding her hands like she was about to negotiate a business deal. "All right," she said, tone suddenly smooth. "Obviously, Marcus overreacted. He was emotional. We all were. But the lodge is part of the family estate. It should be handled as such." She turned to me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sweetheart," she said, and the word sounded wrong coming from her mouth. "You can't afford the property tax on a place like that. You can't maintain it. You'd lose it within a year. The best thing, the right thing, is for you to sign it over to us so we can manage it properly. For the family." For the family. The same family that had kicked me out when I was pregnant. The same family that had never once bought Lily a birthday present. Now, all of a sudden, they were all about the family. I glanced at the lawyer. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. "What happens if I don't sign it over?" I asked quietly. My sister scoffed. Listen to her, like she actually thinks she's going to keep it. My mother's eyes hardened. The fake sweetness evaporated. "Then we'll contest the will," she snapped. "We will drag this through court. We will tell every judge who will listen how you manipulated your dying brother, how you isolated him, how you wormed your way into his finances." My mouth fell open. "That's not true. You know that's not true. I was the only one who what? Who showed up and played nurse to make yourself look good? Don't pretend you did anything out of the goodness of your heart." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. She was rewriting history right in front of me, twisting my love for Marcus into some kind of scheme. The lawyer interjected again, firmer this time. "Mrs. Last Name, there is no evidence of coercion or undue influence. Your son met with me multiple times alone. He was adamant." "That's because she poisoned him against us," my sister spat, pointing a finger straight at me. "Ever since she ran off and ruined her life, she's been jealous. And now she thinks she's going to walk away with $1 million lodge while we get nothing?" Jealous. If only they knew how many nights I'd lain awake, not envying Marcus's money, but his freedom from their constant criticism. "I didn't ask for this," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't even know. I thought he'd leave it to all of you. I thought maybe he'd leave me something small for Lily. I never expected." "Then prove it," my mother cut in. "Prove you're not selfish. Prove you're not the greedy little girl we always knew you were becoming." The greedy little girl. As if I hadn't scraped and saved and starved myself so Lily could eat. As if I hadn't worked every miserable shift I could get my hands on, while they pretended I didn't exist. The lawyer slid a folder toward me. "You don't have to make any decisions today," he said gently. "These are the documents you'll need if you choose to accept the inheritance. I strongly recommend you take some time, get your own legal advice, and think about what's best for you and your daughter." My daughter. I looked down at the folder. It suddenly felt very heavy. With one signature, I could change both of our lives forever. No more choosing between rent and the electric bill, no more praying the car would start, no more telling Lily maybe next year when she asked about a school trip. But at what cost? Because sitting across from me were the people who had raised me, the people I had spent my whole life trying to please, and they were looking at me like I'd stolen something from them, like a thief caught red-handed. "If you keep this up," his father said quietly, "you will regret it. Blood is thicker than water, but even blood has limits." I left that office clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. My family walked out ahead of me in a tight little cluster, their heads bowed together, whispering. Not one of them looked back. That night, my phone started buzzing non-stop. Texts from my sister, from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some pretended to be neutral. "Maybe it's best for everyone if you sign it over. Keep the peace." Others were downright vicious. "You're disgusting. Marcus would be ashamed of you. You're tearing this family apart." I cried myself to sleep on the couch with the unopened folder next to me, Lily's little arm thrown over my waist, her warm breath on my neck. The next morning, my mother called. Her voice was calm, too calm. She asked me to come over to talk things through before the funeral, alone. Every instinct in my body told me not to go, but a small, desperate part of me still hoped that maybe she'd softened, that maybe grief had cracked her hard shell, that maybe, for once, she'd choose me over money. So I went. I had no idea that I was walking straight into an ultimatum that would change everything. My parents' house hadn't changed in years, but somehow it felt smaller when I pulled into the driveway that day. Smaller and colder, like all the warm memories I used to have of that place had been scraped out and replaced with something sharp. I sat in the car for a full minute, engine off, fingers gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Every part of me was screaming, "Turn around, go home." But that old, wounded part, the little girl who still wanted her parents to love her, made me open the door and walk up those steps. My mother answered before I could even knock twice. She looked like she hadn't slept. Dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed into a hard line. For a second, I thought I saw something like grief there, something human. Then her gaze dropped to my hands like she was checking for that folder from the lawyer's office, and it was gone. "Come in," she said curtly, stepping back. My father was at the dining table, a stack of papers in front of him. My sister leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, eyes already narrowed at me like I'd tracked mud onto her clean floor. I stayed standing. I felt like if I sat down, I might never get back up. "We don't have a lot of time," my father started. "This is tomorrow, and this needs to be settled before then." "This?" I repeated. "You mean Marcus or the lodge?" My mother's eyes flashed. "Don't be dramatic. We're trying to fix the mess you made." "I didn't make something." I stopped. Fighting about that wasn't going to go anywhere. "You asked me to come, so talk." My father slid one of the papers across the table towards me. "This is a quitclaim deed. It transfers your interest in the lodge back to the family. Once you sign it, we can handle things like they were always meant to be handled." I stared at the paper. My name was already typed there, blank line waiting for my signature. They hadn't invited me over to talk. They invited me over to sign. My throat tightened. "You already filled this out." "Of course we did," my sister said. "We're trying to make this as easy as possible for you. You sign, you walk away, we forget this whole unfortunate situation." "Unfortunate?" I repeated. "You mean Marcus dying or him leaving me the lodge?" My mother's let out a sharp breath. "Don't twist things. You know exactly what we mean. The lodge is part of the family's future. Your brother understood that. He built that place with us in mind." "With you in mind," I said quietly. Her nostrils flared. "We supported him. We guided him. We helped him with his first down payment." I almost laughed. Supported him? I remember all the times they'd bragged about him when things were going well, and all the times they disappeared when he was struggling. "He wasn't confused," I said quietly. "The lawyer said he was very clear." My father's eyes went cold. "Your brother was on medication. He was in pain. People make irrational decisions when they're dying." I swallowed hard. "So his decision is irrational because it doesn't benefit you?" My mother stepped closer. "Listen to me. You cannot handle this. You can barely handle your own life. You're living in a tiny apartment, juggling 2 dead-end jobs, clinging to that child like a life raft. This place will eat you alive. The taxes, the upkeep, the liability. You think this is some fairy tale where you move into a mountain lodge and everything magically gets better?" "No," I said. "I don't think anything magically gets better. Nothing in my life has ever magically gotten better." "Exactly," she snapped. "So don't make it worse. Sign the papers, we'll take the burden, we'll even give you something from the sale when we eventually decide to let it go. A fair share." A fair share. They were talking about giving me scraps from the table after cutting me out of the kitchen. "How much?" I asked before I could stop myself. My sister shrugged. "We haven't worked that out yet, but you'd get something. You don't deserve nothing." There it was, the truth. In their minds, I didn't deserve the lodge. I didn't deserve security. I deserved something, whatever tiny percentage they decided was acceptable. "And if I don't sign?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother's jaw tightened. "Then you keep tearing this family apart. You humiliate us. You force us into court. You make everyone see what kind of person you've become." "I took care of him," I said suddenly, the words bursting out before I could swallow them back down. "When he was sick, when he couldn't get out of bed, when he was in pain, I drove up there every weekend. I sat with him. I cleaned up after him. I held his hand when he thought he was going to die. Where were you?" My mother's eyes flashed with something like guilt for a split second, then hardened. "We were praying for him," she said stiffly. "No," I said, "you were posting about him. There's a difference." Silence fell. My father's face darkened. My sister looked away. I knew I'd crossed some invisible line, but something in me was too tired, too broken to care. My mother took a slow step towards me, then another. She reached out and grabbed my wrist, fingers digging into my skin. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "That lodge belongs to the family estate. You haven't earned a dime in your life. Sign it over to us, or you are dead to this family. Do you understand me?" There it was, the threat I'd heard replaying in my head over and over since the lawyer read the will. Sign it over, or you're dead to us. I pulled my wrist back, rubbing the red marks her fingers had left. My whole body was shaking. "Maybe I already was," I said quietly. My mother blinked. "What did you say?" "I said," I repeated, louder this time, "maybe I already was dead to this family. You cut me off when I needed you most. You turned your back on Lily, your own granddaughter. You made sure I knew I was an embarrassment. So don't stand there and act like I'm the one breaking this family." Listen to her, victim as always. My father pushed the paper closer across the table. "Think about your daughter," he said. "Think about how hard her life will be if you make enemies of us. We have connections. We can help her, or we can stay out of it." Help her? They'd never even sent her a birthday card. "I am thinking about her," I said. "For the first time in my life, I have something that might actually give her security, and you're asking me to sign it away because it doesn't fit your idea of family estate." My mother's voice dropped even lower. "If you keep that lodge, don't you dare show up here again. Don't call, don't send pictures. We will not acknowledge you or that child. You walk out that door without signing, and you're on your own, completely." The words sliced through me. A part of me wanted to break, to beg, to grab a pen and sign anything they put in front of me, just to stop feeling like a little girl being punished again. But another part, a quieter, steadier part, whispered, "You've already been on your own. You've already raised a child without them. You've survived without their approval." I looked down at the quitclaim deed, my name on the line, the empty space where my signature would go. Then I pushed it back across the table. "I'm not signing," I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't shake. My mother stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. My father's lips pressed into a thin line. My sister muttered something under her breath that I didn't catch. "Get out," my mother said finally. "Get out of my house." I walked to the door on shaky legs. My hand was on the knob when she spoke one last time. "And don't bring that file to the funeral. We don't need everyone seeing what kind of vulture you've become." I didn't trust myself to answer. I just left. I got into my car and sat there, the silence pressing in on me. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely put the keys in the ignition. I started driving. I don't even remember making the decision. I just knew I couldn't go back to my apartment, back to the same four walls and the stack of bills on the counter. My mind was spinning. My mother's threat, my father's cold warning, my sister's sneer, the words "dead to this family" echoing over and over. Halfway through town at a red light, I realized which direction I was going. Towards the highway, towards the mountains, towards the lodge. The drive felt different this time. Every mile I put between me and my parents' house, my breathing got a little easier. Not calm, I was too wrecked for that, but less suffocating. By the time the road started to climb and the trees thickened, my tears had dried. I was just numb and exhausted. When I pulled into the gravel driveway and saw the lodge rise up in front of me, my chest tightened again, but in a different way. This place wasn't just an asset or the family estate. It was the last piece of Marcus I had left. I got out of the car and just stood there for a minute staring. The wood siding, the warp-around porch, the windows catching the late afternoon light. I could almost see him on the steps, waving, calling my name. Instead, there was only silence. Inside, it still smelled faintly like him, that mix of coffee, pine cleaner, and the cologne he always wore. Lily's drawings were still stuck to the fridge with magnets. An extra toothbrush sat in the bathroom cup where I'd left it on my last visit. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the backs of chairs, the edge of the kitchen counter, the blanket draped over the couch. My mind kept flashing between this warm, wooden space and the cold, hard edges of my parents' dining room. Greedy, vulture, dead to this family. I sank onto the couch and buried my face in my hands. For a few minutes, all I could do was sob. Big, ugly, chest-deep sobs that shook my whole body. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered into the fabric. "I didn't ask for any of this." When I finally sat up, my eyes landed on the coffee table. There was a manila envelope sitting there, right in the center. My name was written on it in Marcus's messy handwriting. My heart lurched. I picked it up with shaking hands. The flap was already unsealed, like it had been waiting for me. Inside was a letter, several pages, folded neatly. I unfolded the first page and saw the date at the top, a few weeks before he died. My eyes blurred as I started to read. "Hey, little sis," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I finally lost that stupid argument with my oncologist about living forever." I let out a choked laugh, tears already spilling again. I was so him, joking in the first line of his own goodbye letter. "You think you messed up your life," he'd written, "which is why I wanted you to hear this from me, in my own words, not from some stiff guy in a suit reading legal jargon." I kept reading, each line digging deeper into places I didn't know were still sore. He wrote about the first time he'd brought me to the lodge, how my shoulders had dropped the second we walked in, like I had finally unclenched muscles I'd been holding tight since childhood. He wrote about watching me with Lily, how I'd fall asleep sitting up on the couch, still in my work clothes, one hand resting on her back as she napped, how I never complained even when I had every right to. "You think you messed up your life," he wrote, "but all I've ever seen is you working twice as hard with half the support. You didn't ruin anything. You chose a harder path and you kept walking it when everyone else bailed." I wiped my eyes to keep reading. He wrote about our parents, too. Not in a cruel way, just honest, about how they only knew how to love things they could brag about, how they treated him like a trophy and me like a warning sign. "I played my role," he said. "I let them brag. I let them feel proud. But you were the brave one. You were the one who showed up for me when I stopped being shiny." Then there was a paragraph that made my breath catch. "I know what they're going to say when they find out about the will," he wrote. "They're going to call you greedy. They're going to say you manipulated me. They're going to tell you that lodge belongs to the family. But newsflash, you are my family. You and Lily. You were there when the pain was bad. You were there when the business was failing. You were there when nobody knew if I'd wake up the next day. Mom and Dad were busy protecting their image. You were busy protecting me." I could barely see the words now. "I'm leaving you the lodge because I want you and Lily to have something solid under your feet for once. A place that's yours. A way out of the constant survival mode you've been in since you were 18. This isn't charity. This is payback in the best way. For every time you drove here half asleep, for every time you held a puke bucket and still tried to make me laugh." The last page was shorter. "Please don't let them guilt you into signing it away. They will try. They will use every trick they know. But this is my decision, my gift, my thank you. Keeping it doesn't make you selfish. It makes you brave. For once in your life, choose yourself. Choose Lily, even if it means losing them. To be honest, you lost them a long time ago. You just haven't admitted it yet. I love you. Take care of my mountains for me." By the time I reached the final line, I was shaking all over. I pressed the letter to my chest and leaned back into the couch, staring up at the wooden beams of the ceiling. The house creaked softly around me, like it was breathing. In that moment, something inside me shifted. All my life, I had let my parents define my worth. I had believed their version of me, the screw-up, the burden, the eternal disappointment. Even when I worked myself to the bone, even when I did everything alone, some part of me still believed I wasn't enough. But Marcus had seen me, really seen me. He hadn't just said, "I love you." He'd backed it up with action, with time, with this letter, with the lodge. This wasn't stealing. This wasn't manipulation. This was him making a choice while he was still clear-headed and painfully aware of who actually showed up for him. I sat there for a long time, listening to the wind outside, the faint rustle of trees, and slowly the question that had been tormenting me, "Do I deserve this?" started to fade. It was replaced by a different one. Am I finally going to stop letting them decide what I deserve? By the time the sky outside had turned dark, I knew my answer. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into my bag like armor. Then I stood up and walked to the front door. Tomorrow was the funeral. Tomorrow I'd have to face them again, their stares, their whispers, their disgust. But for the first time, I wouldn't be walking in as the scared, apologetic daughter begging for scraps of approval. I'd be walking in as the woman my brother believed I was. And I already knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was going to keep the lodge, even if it meant losing the rest of them forever. The morning of the funeral, I woke up before the sun. For a few seconds, before I was fully awake, I forgot what day it was. Then it all crashed back over me. Marcus was gone. My parents had told me I was dead to them. And the lodge was now the line in the sand between us. Lily was still asleep, her little body curled up like a comma under the blanket. I watched her for a moment, that familiar ache in my chest twisting tighter. Choose yourself. Choose Lily. Marcus's words from the letter echoed in my head. On the kitchen table, the folder from the lawyer's office sat where I'd left it. I'd spent half the night staring at those documents, tracing the lines with my fingertip, accepting the inheritance, making it official. I picked up a pen. My hand hovered for a second. One signature, and everything changed. Then I thought about my parents' dining room, the quitclaim deed, my mother's fingers digging into my wrist. Sign it over or you're dead to this family. I thought about all the years I'd already been living like I had no family, about the letter waiting in my bag telling me this was not a mistake, it was a thank you. I signed. The pen scratched across the paper, my name settling into the line like it had been meant to be there all along. My hand was shaking, but I signed every page I needed to. Then I slid the documents back into the folder and placed Marcus's letter on top of them. "Okay," I whispered to nobody. "Okay." By the time we pulled into the funeral home parking lot, my stomach was in knots. Lily held my hand as we walked up the steps, her other hand clutching the little stuffed bunny Marcus had bought her on one of our lodge trips. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and sadness. People murmured in little clusters, tissues rustled, a soft organ melody played somewhere down the hall. And then the whispers started. "There she is. That's the one who got the lodge. I heard she manipulated him." I kept my eyes straight ahead, but I could feel their stares crawling over me like ants. Some faces I recognized from weddings and holidays long gone. Cousins, old family friends, people who hadn't given me a second thought in years, now suddenly so curious about my life. My parents stood near the front of the room, receiving condolences like royalty. My mother looked put together, her makeup flawless, her black dress crisp. My father's arm was around her shoulders in a picture-perfect display of grief. When my mother's eyes landed on me, her expression didn't change, not even a flicker of recognition. She simply turned slightly, presenting her other side to the couple she was talking to, shutting me out like I was some stranger who wandered in off the street. I swallowed hard and found a seat near the back. Lily climbed into my lap and I wrapped my arms around her, grateful for the weight of her, the warmth, something real to hold on to in a room of cold politeness. The service was a blur. People stood up and told stories about Marcus, funny ones from his childhood, sweet ones about his generosity. Church friends talked about his faith. Business associates talked about his work ethic. I sat there, my throat burning, thinking about all the stories nobody in that room knew, the late-night phone calls when he couldn't sleep from the pain, the way he'd confessed he was scared, the way he'd begged me not to tell Mom and Dad how bad it really was. At one point, my parents went up together. My mother's voice trembled just enough to seem sincere as she talked about her beloved son and how proud they'd always been of him. My father stared out over the crowd like a king surveying his kingdom. Not once did they mention the lodge. Not once did they mention me. When the service ended, people started filing past the casket to say their last goodbyes. I waited until the line thinned, then stood up, legs unsteady. "Can I say bye to Uncle Marcus?" Lily whispered. "Yeah, baby, we're going to say goodbye." We walked up together. Up close, his face didn't look like him. Peaceful, they called it. To me, it just looked empty. Like the best parts of him had gone somewhere else, somewhere the rest of us couldn't touch. I leaned down, my hand resting on the edge of the casket, and whispered so quietly only he could hear. "I signed it. I'm keeping the lodge. I'm going to take care of your mountains. I promise." A tear slid off my chin and landed on the polished wood. I brushed Lily's hair back as she peered up, too young to really understand, but sensing the weight of the moment. "Bye, Uncle Marcus," she said softly, placing her bunny's little paw on his sleeve. My chest clenched so hard, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from sobbing. As we stepped away, I felt a hand clamp down on my elbow. It was my sister. Her smile was fixed for the benefit of anyone watching, but her fingers dug into my skin like claws. "Mom wants to see you," she said through her teeth. "Now." She didn't wait for my answer. She steered me towards a side hallway, away from the crowd, towards a small room labeled family. Lily trotted along beside us, confused. Inside, my parents were waiting. The door clicked shut behind us, muffling the sounds of mourners outside. My mother's face was different now. No more sad, fragile mask, just raw anger. "We're not going to do this out there," she said, voice low and sharp. "We're going to resolve it here." "I thought we already had this conversation," I said quietly. "At your house." My father's gaze dropped to the folder clutched under my arm. "Have you signed?" he asked. "Yes," I said. For a split second, relief flickered across his face. My mother's shoulders dropped a fraction. My sister actually smiled. "Good girl," my mother said. "You did the right thing." I took a breath. "I signed the acceptance papers. I'm the legal owner of the lodge now." It was like the air got sucked out of the room. My mother's mouth fell open. My sister's smile froze and then curdled. My father's eyes went dark. "What did you just say?" my mother whispered. "I signed," I repeated, steadier this time. "I accepted what Marcus left me. I'm keeping the lodge." My sister let out a harsh laugh. "You can't be serious. After everything we said? After everything Mom and Dad offered you?" "You mean after the threats? After telling me I'd be dead to you?" My mother took a step toward me, her heels clicking against the linoleum. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've humiliated us. People are already talking. They're asking questions. They want to know why our own son would leave everything to his failure of a sister." The word landed, but it didn't sink in the way it used to. Marcus's letter was like a shield between me and their poison. "You don't get to call me a failure anymore," I said, my voice shaking, but loud enough that Lily squeezed my hand. I have raised a child by myself with no help from you. I've worked every job I could get. I showed up for your son when he was dying, and you showed up when there was an audience. How dare you? My father growled. How dare I? How dare you stand out there and talk about what a wonderful son he was when you couldn't even be bothered to come up to the lodge when he begged you to visit? How dare you act like I stole something from you when all I did was be there when you weren't? My mother's face twisted. You poisoned him against us. You filled his head with lies. I reached into my bag with trembling hands and pulled out the envelope. Her eyes followed it like it was a weapon. He wrote this weeks before he died. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly how you'd react. He begged me not to let you bully me into giving it up. I held the letter to my chest. I didn't offer to let them read it. That part of him was mine. My father's voice dropped to that dangerous, quiet tone again. You think that house will make you happy? He asked. You think money will fill that empty pit inside you? No, I said. Then why are you doing this? My mother demanded. Why are you tearing this family apart? Because he asked me to, I said simply. Because for once in my life, someone in this family looked at me and saw more than a mistake. Because he wanted Lily and me to have a chance at something better, and I am not going to spit on that because you're offended you didn't get your cut. My sister stepped closer, her eyes glittering with tears, not of grief, but of rage. You're disgusting, standing here at his funeral making this about you. I didn't bring it up, I said. You dragged me in here. You wanted an answer. This is it. You're selfish, my mother said. Ungrateful. You have always been a taker. We took you in, we fed you, we clothed you, and this is how you repay us? I almost laughed. I kicked you out when you were pregnant. You haven't fed me in over a decade. My father pointed at the door. Get out, he said. You are not welcome here. Dad, I started. Don't call me that, he snapped. You are no daughter of mine. You made your choice. Go live in your precious lodge and see how far it gets you when you have no family left. There it was, the sentence they'd been building towards since the attorney's office. Don't come to Christmas, my mother added, voice rising now. Don't come to weddings, don't come to funerals. As far as we're concerned, you're gone. You and that child. Lily's hand tightened around mine. Mommy, she whispered, eyes wide. It's okay, baby, I said softly, even though my heart felt like it was splintering. We're going to be okay. I stood back up and looked at my parents. The people I had spent my entire life trying to please, trying to earn love from. All I saw now were two strangers more angry about losing a house than losing a son. You know what's funny? I said quietly. For years, I thought there was something wrong with me because you couldn't love me. I thought I had to be broken. But standing here, watching you care more about a lodge than the fact that your daughter is grieving too, I finally get it. Get out, my mother repeated, almost shrieking now. You are ruining this day. I opened the door. The sounds of the funeral home rushed back in. Soft organ music, low voices, the clink of coffee cups in the reception area. As I stepped into the hallway, my mother called out after me, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. If you see her, she said to a cousin who just walked by, remember, she chose money over family. She betrayed us. She's not one of us anymore. Family betrayal. They wanted to brand me with it, make sure everyone knew their version of the story, make sure I was the villain in every whispered conversation that would follow. I could feel eyes on me as I walked down that hallway with Lily, the envelope and the signed papers clutched to my chest. People parted to let us pass. some with pity, some with judgment, some with open curiosity. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked my side. "Mommy, why is Grandma mad?" Lily asked as we stepped out into the cold air. I took a deep breath. The sky was a hard, bright blue, the kind that made the edges of everything look sharper. "Because Grandma doesn't understand," I said carefully. "And sometimes, when people don't understand, they get mean." "Are we in trouble?" she asked. I thought about the lodge, about the letter, about the way my parents had tossed around the word family like a weapon. "No, baby," I said, opening the car door for her. I buckled her in, then walked around to the driver's side. Before I got in, I leaned against the car for a second, looking back at the building. My mother's silhouette was visible through one of the windows, gesturing wildly as she talked to a group of people. They wanted me gone. Fine. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and for the first time that day, I felt something close to peace. Raw and painful and messy, but real. As I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving my parents, the whispers, and the funeral behind me, one thought settled in my chest, like a stone and a feather at the same time. I had lost the family I was born into, but I was driving toward the future my brother had made sure I would have, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. I didn't drive back to my apartment after the funeral. I pointed the car toward the mountains. The farther I got from the city, from the church parking lot and the funeral home and the weight of my parents' eyes on my back, the easier it was to breathe. It wasn't happiness, not even close. It was more like when you've been holding your breath for too long and finally let a little air in, even though your chest still hurts. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, her bunny clutched against her chest. I kept glancing at her in the mirror, that fierce, aching love rising up again and again. Whatever else happened, whatever anyone said about me, I knew one thing. I was going to make this work for her. When we pulled into the lodge driveway, the sun was just starting to set, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink behind the dark line of trees. It looked almost exactly like the first time Marcus brought us here. Except this time, he wasn't on the porch waiting. I turned off the engine and just sat there for a second, listening to it tick as it cooled. The silence wrapped around us, thick but not unfriendly. "This is our house now?" Lily asked sleepily from the back. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, baby," I said. "It is." We carried our bags inside. I put the folder from the lawyer and Marcus's letter on the kitchen counter, like you'd put down keys in a normal house after a normal day. It felt right and wrong at the same time. The next morning, I called the lawyer from the lodge's landline. My cell reception out there was spotty. He said, "I've got your documents. I see you've signed everything. That makes it official. The lodge is yours." The word yours made my stomach flip. He walked me through some of the practical stuff, tax records, insurance, business accounts tied to the lodge rental. It wasn't just a house. It was a small, struggling business Marcus had been trying to get off the ground between treatments. "It's a lot," I admitted. "I didn't know anything about running a lodge." "You didn't know anything about being a single mother either," he said gently. "And you're doing that." After I hung up, I stood in the middle of the living room and turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. The worn leather couch, the big fireplace, the framed photos on the walls, mostly of mountains and trees, but a few of us. Me and Marcus and Lily on the porch, laughing at something I couldn't remember now. "This is ours," I said out loud, testing the words on my tongue. Ours. The first few weeks were chaos. Grief doesn't care if you've suddenly become a property owner. It doesn't wait politely while you figure out mortgage payments and booking websites. It just crashes over you whenever it wants. Some mornings I'd wake up early and sit on the porch steps with a cup of coffee, watching the mist burn off the hills, and I'd feel this sharp, almost unbearable mix of pain and gratitude. Pain that Marcus wasn't sitting next to me, gratitude that he'd made sure I could. I drove back to the city a few times to pack up our apartment. Each time, the building felt smaller, more cramped, like a life I'd already outgrown but had been too scared to leave. My neighbors asked polite questions. I gave vague answers. "We're moving," I said. "Out of town." I didn't see my parents. They didn't call. My sister sent one text. "Heard you're really going through with this. Don't come crying to us when it falls apart." I stared at the screen for a long time, then deleted the message. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. By the time we moved into the lodge full-time, Lily had started to adjust. She missed her old school at first, her friends, the playground she knew. But kids are more flexible than we give them credit for. Her new school was smaller, the kind where teachers knew all the kids' names and parents waved at each other in the parking lot. The first time I filled out an emergency contact form, I hesitated. I'd always written my parents' number before, even when we weren't speaking, because some part of me believed blood meant obligation. This time, I left their names blank. I wrote the number of a neighbor down the road instead, a single older woman named Carol who showed up on our first day with a homemade pie and an offer to help with anything you need, honey. "You're out here alone?" she'd said, looking concerned. "Not alone," I'd answered, glancing at Lily. "Not anymore." Running the lodge was work, a lot of it. I scrubbed floors, washed sheets until my hands were raw, patched up little dings in the walls. I watched video tutorials on how to fix leaky faucets. I learned how to list the property on rental sites, how to take halfway decent photos on my phone, how to write a description that didn't sound like I was begging. The first time someone booked a weekend, I almost cried. A family of 4 pulled up in an SUV, kids spilling out, eyes wide as they took in the view. "This place is amazing," the dad said, turning a slow circle in the living room. "How long have you had it?" "A while," I said, my hand resting on the back of the couch. "It belonged to my brother. Now I take care of it." He nodded like that made perfect sense. No questions, no prying, just acceptance. After they left, I walked through the house, picking up stray socks and cookie crumbs, and realized something. I wasn't cleaning up after some dead-end job. I was caring for something that belonged to me and my daughter. Every stain, every scuff mark was proof that life was happening here, on our terms. Money didn't pour in overnight. It wasn't a miracle cure for every bill. But slowly, steadily, things shifted. I paid off the last of the credit card debt that had been hanging over my head for years. I fixed the brakes on my car instead of just praying they wouldn't go out. I bought my daughter a new winter coat before she outgrew the old one. One evening, months after the funeral, I was sitting at the lodge's big wooden dining table, spreading out reservation calendars and school forms, when Lily came over with a drawing. "It's us," she said, laying it proudly in front of me. 2 stick figures on a hill, a little one with pigtails, a taller one with a wild mess of hair that I guessed was supposed to be me. Behind us, a big square with a triangle roof, the lodge, and scribbled mountains all around. Up in the corner was another figure, floating, drawn with a wobbly smile. "Is that Uncle Marcus?" I asked. "Yeah," she said. "He's watching the house from the sky." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You like it here?" She nodded so hard her hair bounced. "I like the air and the trees, and when people come to stay and I get to say, 'Welcome to our lodge.'" Our lodge. I pinned her drawing to the fridge, right next to one Marcus had stuck there years ago, a younger version of Lily scribbled in crayon on cheap paper. Our first visit. For a moment, time folded in on itself, past and present pressed together, stitched by this house, this kid, that man who wasn't here anymore but somehow still was. Every now and then, I'd hear about my parents through other people. A cousin would send a message, "Saw your folks at church. They still aren't talking about you." Or a former neighbor would mention running into my mother at the grocery store and hearing her say, "We don't have a younger daughter." The first time I heard that, it felt like a punch. The third or fourth time, it felt like confirmation of what I already knew the day they told me to get out of their house. They had made their choice long before I ever signed a paper. One afternoon, about a year after Marcus died, an envelope arrived in the mail with no return address. My heart did that uneasy flip again as I held it. I half expected it to be some legal notice, some new attempt to come after the lodge. Inside was a short note and a photo. The note was from my aunt, my mother's younger sister, the one who was always quieter at family gatherings, always watching more than talking. "I thought you should have this," the note read. "For what it's worth, I know you didn't steal anything. Marcus told me what he was planning before he changed the will. He said you were the only one who'd earned that place. Your mother will never admit it, but deep down, she knows it too. Take care of yourself and that little girl. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for being chosen." The photo was me and Marcus, maybe 10 and 16, sitting on the back steps of my parents' house. He had his arm around my shoulders, and we were both laughing at something off camera. I didn't even remember the picture being taken. I stood there in the kitchen with that photo in one hand and my aunt's note in the other, and something inside me loosened. Not because my parents were forgiven or because everything was magically healed. It was something simpler. Proof that the story they were telling about me wasn't the whole story. Other people had seen pieces of the truth too. That night, after I put Lily to bed, I took Marcus's letter out again. The paper was worn at the folds from how many times I'd read it, but the ink was still clear. "Keeping it doesn't make you selfish," he'd written. "It makes you brave." I went out onto the porch, wrapped in one of the old flannel blankets Marcus used to keep draped over the back of the couch. The air was sharp and cold, filled with the smell of pine and distant wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Above me, the sky was wide and full of stars. Sometimes, standing there, I still missed my parents. Not the way they really were, but the idea of them, the fantasy version I'd carried around for years. The mother who hugged, the father who listened, the family who rallied around me instead of pushing me out. But then I'd look back at the house behind me, at the warm square of light from Lily's bedroom window, at the hand-drawn pictures on the fridge and the muddy little shoes by the door, and remembered something. I hadn't chosen money over family. I had chosen the only real family I'd ever had, the brother who showed up and the daughter who depended on me. The mountains didn't care who was right. The trees didn't care whose last name was on the deed. But every time the wind moved through the pines and the boards of the porch creaked under my feet, I felt like the lodge itself was agreeing with Marcus. You were always enough. In the end, my parents kept their word. They never called. They never wrote. They didn't send cards on Lily's birthdays or mine. They went on telling everyone who would listen that I'd betrayed them, that I'd torn the family apart. But here's what they didn't understand. This house, this lodge my brother left me, didn't just give me financial security. It gave me something I'd never had in that old, cold dining room I grew up in. A place where I didn't have to earn my right to be there. A place where my daughter could grow up knowing that stability didn't always come from the people who shared your blood. A place where love had been given freely, and then written into the very walls. One evening, a couple of years later, Lily and I were sitting on the porch swing, watching the sun go down. She was a little older, legs longer, eyes still bright. Out of nowhere, she asked, "Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa ever going to visit our lodge?" The question hit me in that soft, bruised place that never completely goes away. "I don't know, baby," I said honestly. "They might not. Some people, they can't see past their own hurt or their own pride." "Do you want them to?" she asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. About what it would feel like to see my mother's car pull into the driveway, my father's stiff walk up the path. There was a time I would have done anything to make them come, to make them see me. But now, I think if they came, it would have to be because they saw me for who I really am, not who they decided I was. "And who are you?" she asked, with the blunt curiosity only kids have. I looked out at the mountains, their edges soft in the fading light. Then I looked at her. "I'm your mom," I said. "I'm the woman Uncle Marcus trusted with his favorite place. I'm the person who kept going when it felt impossible. I'm enough." She nodded like that was the most obvious thing in the world, then leaned her head against my arm. "Yeah, you are." The wind moved through the trees, sending a shiver down my spine and across the porch. Somewhere a bird called out one last time before settling in for the night. I closed my eyes and let the sound of it all wash over me. The creak of the swing, the rustle of leaves, my daughter's steady breathing next to me. I had lost my parents. I had lost the illusion of the family I thought I was supposed to have. But in their place, I had gained something solid, something quiet and real. A home, a future, and the unshakable knowledge that I didn't have to be who they said I was. I had kept the lodge. And in a way I never expected, the lodge had kept me, too. Sometimes I sit on that porch long after Lily's gone to bed, and I think about the version of my life that could have happened if I'd signed those papers. In that version, my parents are still speaking to me. I still get the obligatory holiday texts. Maybe I sit at their table a couple of times a year, swallowing my pride along with dry turkey, pretending I don't notice the way they talk over me. In that version, the lodge belongs to them. It's probably sold by now, carved up into numbers on a bank statement. Maybe they brag about how smart they were to handle Marcus's affairs. And in that version, I'm still in my tiny apartment, still working shifts that barely cover the basics, still lying awake at night wondering how I'm going to pay for Lily's braces or college or even just a decent pair of shoes. I think about that life, and I feel sad for the woman living it, because I know her. She's the woman who never stopped believing that if she just tried a little harder, bent a little further, stayed a little quieter, her family would finally decide she was worthy. She's the woman who keeps handing over pieces of herself in exchange for a kind word that never comes. I was that woman for a very long time. Keeping the lodge didn't magically fix everything broken inside me. It didn't erase the years of feeling like the black sheep, the screw-up, the problem child. There are still days when a random memory, my father's voice saying, "You're on your own," my mother's lip curling in disgust, pops into my head and makes my stomach tight. But there's a difference now. Now, when those memories come, I have something to hold up against them. Not just a house, not just wood and stone and a deed with my name on it. I have evidence. Evidence that someone who knew me, who'd seen me at my absolute worst, mascara-streaked and bone-tired and terrified, still looked at me and said, "You deserve this." Evidence that showing up counts more than looking good. Evidence that love can look like a late-night drive and a puke bucket, and a letter saying, "Please, don't let them make you small again." If you've ever been the black sheep in your family, you probably know what it's like to carry that constant question around inside you. Am I the problem? You replay every fight, every cold shoulder, every time you were left out. You twist yourself into shapes, trying to be easier, quieter, more successful, less needy, and still, somehow, it's never enough. Losing my family over that lodge forced me to face a truth I'd been avoiding for years. Sometimes, you are not the problem. Sometimes the problem is that your growth threatens the story other people have written about you. In my parents' story, I was the failure and Marcus was the success. That was the balance that made sense to them. Me struggling, him thriving. Me begging, them giving, or refusing. The moment Marcus flipped that script, the moment he decided the failure deserved the thing they valued most, their whole story fell apart. And instead of questioning the story, they chose to erase me. For a long time, that hurt more than I can put into words. But here's what surprised me. After the hurt, after the anger, something else came. Relief. Relief that I no longer had to audition for a role I never wanted in the first place. Relief that I didn't have to keep pretending their version of love was enough. Relief that I could build a life that made sense to me, even if it looked like betrayal to them. Sometimes people will say, "I can't believe you chose money over your own parents." I don't argue with them. They don't know the whole story, and honestly, they don't need to. But in my heart, I know the truth. I didn't choose money over family. I chose real love over conditional love. I chose the brother who had already proven over and over that I mattered more than his image. I chose the little girl sleeping down the hall, who needs a mother who believes she deserves good things, not a mother who teaches her to hand every blessing back because someone else yells loud enough. Most of all, I chose myself. Not the version of me my parents described at every opportunity, the irresponsible one, the greedy one, the ungrateful one, but the version Marcus saw. The woman who keeps showing up. The woman who does the hard thing even when nobody's clapping. If you're listening to this and you're standing at your version of that dining room table, pen in your throat, heart in your throat, torn between what you know is right for you and what will keep everyone comfortable, I can't tell you what to do. Every situation is different. Every family is different. But I can tell you this. The day you stop letting other people define what you deserve is the day your real life begins. For me, that moment happened with a signature on a stack of legal documents and a slammed door in my face. It came with whispers and gossip and the heavy label of family betrayal stamped on my back. It also came with a front porch in the mountains, a child who feels safe, and a sense of peace I had never known before. Sometimes I still talk to Marcus when the house is quiet and the wind is high. I stand at the window, looking out at the dark line of trees, and I say, "I kept it. I did what you asked. I chose us." And in those moments, I don't hear words back, obviously, but I feel something. Like the house settles a little deeper on its foundations, like the floorboards sigh in agreement, like the creak of the stairs and the hum of the fridge and the tick of the old clock are all saying the same thing he wrote in that letter. You were always enough. I just had to believe it too.